Hello Zero Books readers. In this video we'll juxtapose the ideas in the books What is Postmodern Conservatism and Fucking Law, The Search for Her Sexual Ethics. Specifically, we'll be hearing from Victoria Brooks on the subject of her search for sexual ethics at a nude beach for swingers, and from Konrad Hamilton on the topic of Marx's gender politics.
So here I am in one of London's cruising spots. There are a few that remain, although they're kind of hidden, and you have to know about them to know about them. You have to have heard about them through often the LGBTQ community. This is one of my favourites. This is a space that is just outside of Epping Forest in northeast London, just near one of my favourite places called Hollow Ponds, a really eerie and interesting space. And you really get the sense that an encounter can kind of pop up anywhere, bodies can appear from anywhere.
Along with hearing from Konrad and Victoria, you'll also hear from myself, that is from Douglas Lane, and from my co-star in our new series, We Live in a Society, and that is M.K. Hobson. Before we get underway with this video experiment, we have to set an objective, make it clear what we're trying to achieve, what question we want to answer. In Konrad Hamilton and Matthew McManus's book, What is Postmodern Conservatism?, they point out that identity politics is an individualist method. It is based on the individual's demand for recognition. And they claim that the reason that the discourse of identity politics has become the dominant ideological orientation for many activists and academics is because any alternative to capitalism as an economic and political order appears to be impossible. The question for us then is, does her search, Victoria Brooks' search, or any other woman's search for sexual ethics amount to questing after recognition, or do women and their sexual desire go beyond such demands? Victoria Brooks attempts to fuck the law, and it's an attempt at liberation. But it's also a complicated one that is set at odds with itself.
Her sexual ethics. A number of years ago, she found herself at a public sex beach in southern France for research purposes. Unsurprisingly, she experienced some ethical dilemmas. Because she was researching the ethics of sexuality, her research involved potentially having sex with men and women at the beach. The question of whether she should or could do so was complicated by a number of factors. She was a woman. She was queer. She was an academic. At the time, she was also in an increasingly difficult relationship with a man who was a philosopher.
I had a number of complicating factors. So the fact that I'm a woman, I'm an academic, I'm queer. I was also in a relationship at the time with a married man who was also a philosopher. So all of these things came together on a beach where I was perhaps likely to have sex with other men and other women. Potentially, not necessarily, but potentially. So I was kind of looking to maybe some of these books up here to help me with the answers. And I came to my space here to think about that, both before and after the project, and I didn't really find any answers.
Brooks understands her struggle against capital as a fight against abstraction, specifically as a fight against the concepts white cisgendered male philosophers use as ideological cover for their oppressive activities. But as she turns against what calls itself reason, Brooks eroticizes her indecision. She longs for and valorizes her own defeat.
In The Holy Family, he sort of paraphrases Fourier in saying that the change in historical epoch can always be determined by the progress of women toward freedom, because in the relation of woman to man, of the weak to the strong, the victory of human nature over brutality is most evident. The degree of emancipation of woman is the natural measure of general emancipation.
Ethics is a field of philosophy that seeks out the foundations of how we should live our lives. It seeks to provide a framework for doing the right thing. This framework is founded on conventional Western philosophical ideas. For instance, conventional ethical thinking finds homosexuality to be an issue rather than an inherent characteristic of bodies. The ethical theorist John Finnis, for example, recently argued that the ethics of homosexuality are still up for discussion. Most of these philosophies are heavily influenced by René Descartes' concept of dualism, which separates these substances of body and mind. This idea of dualism is at the roots of the philosophical canon, from Immanuel Kant to Friedrich Nietzsche to David Hume. Founded in the primacy of knowledge and rationality, these philosophies culminate in the idea at the heart of the liberal philosophy of John Rawls and Ronald Dworkin that for a debate to be moral, it must be capable of being rational. This is so we can use our minds to judge the actions of ourselves and others. Some Western philosophers were more radical, such as Baruch Spinoza, a contemporary of Descartes. His major work, Ethics, opposed Cartesian dualism by unifying body and mind, God and substance. This also hugely influenced modern Western philosophy, particularly big, fashionable continental thinkers such as Martin Heidegger, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Jacques Derrida, who have all sought to place the body on equal philosophical terms with the mind. Despite being a leap forward, this philosophy still does not place all women's bodies on equal philosophical footing with the minds of the men who wrote it.
All the names I've talked about so far have been white men, haven't they? Other than sort of feminism, which is usually described as feminism and not philosophy, and that was white feminism as well. That's kind of the philosophy we're used to talking about. And this is despite some problematic aspects to some of the philosophers that I've spoken about. So, of course, Kant and Hume were racist. Aristotle, the father of Western philosophy, was sexist. Heidegger was a member of the Nazi Party and began an affair with his then student Hannah Arendt when he was a professor. But the idea is that we allow for these ideas and value the minds if we don't value the bodies due to their historical specificity. We expect them to have certain views, and apparently bigoted views are fine. So there's this idea that actually this kind of philosophy is quite dangerous because we endow it with an authority with which we judge, we can judge sexuality.
Toria Brooks and Konrad Hamilton have something in common. They have a common aim. She is arguing for her own emancipation, her own sexual ethics, a decidedly queer and female sexual ethics. And Konrad is criticizing neo-masculinity. They have a common aim, but they take opposing stances philosophically. That is, Brooks takes the side of intuition through Deleuze and Spinoza, while Konrad takes the side of reason through Hegel and Marx. This means that Konrad sides with philosophy as against anti-philosophy. He is on the side of an emancipatory reason and not the goal of emancipation from reason. Brooks rejects the world as it is in favor of feeling, of desire, of her vulva. Hamilton embraces what is, including capitalism, in order to go beyond it.
For whatever its kind of appalling features, that capitalism, by situating women in the workplace, in many respects actually paves the way for their emancipation, because at this point they are becoming waged, and their participation in the labor process and in forms of class struggle will eventually favor the creation of a socialistic dispensation that is more equal.
In a recent video, we reintroduced the Zero Books channel and claimed that we were going in a new direction by recommitting to go in the original direction. That is, the aim we have now is to make good on being a critical theory imprint. We want to rethink critical theory. But rethinking does not mean coming to a premature judgment. Rather than stopping with some preset ethics, the task is to understand our symptom. Figure out how it is that this romantic turn away from Marx, away from the Enlightenment, away from emancipation through reason and towards the desire for permanent resistance, came to be. How is it that this theory of permanent resistance is precisely where critical theory, and thereby reason, has led us?
Well, first, I want to know why critical theory?
For me, critical theory represents what Horkheimer calls the systematic unfolding of a single existential value judgment concerning the crisis-ridden nature of the capitalist system. And for me, beginning from that judgment, it represents an unfolding of that value judgment as we trace reification, domination, sexism, racism, dehumanization, as it spreads throughout the society, we trace it, and we don't respect any disciplinary boundaries when we trace it. We study television seriously, and we study the Odyssey seriously. We take the divisions between economics, history, philosophy, to just be matters of the college catalog and the fragmentation of bourgeois society. So using that as a model for study means that one does not have a list or a sacred canon, which is racist and sexist on its face in philosophy. They're all fat, white old guys, you know? So on the prima facie, it's obviously implausible that the whole wisdom of the West is summed up by 11 fat, white, old guys. This is prima facie implausible. Critical theory gives us a way to try to make connections, to see why that's the case, and to understand philosophy in this broader sense, and to use it to bring together people who are interested in alternatives, in real alternatives. I mean, among the real alternatives are utopian hopes, dreams, daydreams, fantasies, wishes, the voices that are silenced, the voices of women, of blacks, of yellow people. I mean, after all, most of the world isn't white, isn't male.
This is a very idealist interpretation of the Frankfurt School, for example.
Certainly it is, because this is an interpretation that breaks decisively with Adorno's pessimism. I myself find Adorno's pessimism terribly attractive, so I react against it violently.
Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.